The Sri Lankan government calls it deradicalisation. It's detaining those with what it says are extreme religious views and banning the burqa. But Muslims say it's discrimination. So will the new rules stop so-called Islamic extremism in this Asian country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. Today with me, Peter Dobbie. Now, many from Sri Lanka's minority Muslim community say they are being targeted. And in the latest decision affecting them, the government is reintroducing a ban on burqas. It says the full face covering for women is a sign of what it calls religious extremism. And it's barring them on national security grounds. More than 1,000 Muslim schools accused of flouting national education policy will also be shut. The move comes nearly 2 years after a series of attacks on hotels and churches on Easter Sunday. More than 250 people were killed in the assaults by armed groups in 2019. Now, let's have a listen to what the minister had to say.
It affects our national security directly. In our early days, Muslim women and girls never wore the burqa. It is a sign of religious extremism that came about recently. We are definitely going to ban it. Also, there are more than 2,000 madrasa schools in the country. Nobody can open a school and teach whatever you want to the children. From ages 5 to 6, all children must study in accordance with the national education policy.
Well, the decision to ban the burqa follows an order last year mandating that victims of COVID-19 should only ever be cremated. The practice is prohibited by Muslims who bury their dead. The ban on burials was lifted in February after months of protest by Muslim and human rights groups. Separately, the government said it would use a controversial anti-terror law to deal with religious violence. Manel Fernandez has been following the story. Here's her report from Colombo.
The government's latest move is being sort of reacted to with concern among the Muslim community. Now, obviously, this doesn't affect all Muslim women in Sri Lanka. Not all of them wear the burqa. But the community in itself feel that this is another sort of a way of discrimination by the government against the Muslim minority. Now, the government, for its part, says that this is to ensure national security and that this sort of new rule is needed. But obviously, from what we have seen in the recent past in terms of policies and in general sort of treatment of the Muslim community, there is concern, particularly when you look at a new rule brought in under the Prevention of Terrorism Act that essentially allows a person to be held for up to 2 years for the purposes of what the government calls rehabilitation, and this would be for people holding sort of extreme violent religious ideologies. Now, these are reasons that people are beginning to question sort of the timing of this. We've just come at the end of one controversy where the government, for a long period of time with the COVID-19 pandemic, did not allow the burial of COVID-19 victims, and this directly affected the Muslim and Catholic communities. Obviously, the Muslim community had a lot of issues with this, had been struggling for this right, and finally, coincidentally, as the UN Human Rights Council sessions in Geneva took place, the government conceded and allowed the burial of COVID-19 victims. So while on the one hand giving the Muslims back their burial rights, on this hand seems to be taking away the right of Muslim women to wear the burqa.
OK, there we are. Here we go. Let's get going. And before we talk to our guests, all of whom are in Colombo today for Inside Story, just a quick word of, I guess, housekeeping more than anything else. We have tried all day to get representation from the Sri Lankan government. As of now, nobody was available to talk to us here on Al Jazeera. So let's get to those guests. They are Rauff Hakeem, leader of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress, a member of parliament, and formerly a Minister of Justice. Shreen Abdul Saroor, a peace activist and co-founder of the Women's Action Network. Also, Jehan Perera, Executive Director of the National Peace Council of Sri Lanka. Welcome to you all. Rauff Hakeem, as a former Minister of Justice, coming to you first, this is being done, we're told, on national security grounds. What does that mean?
Now, this is certainly an overreaction to an issue which unnecessarily has been brought in to stigmatize the Muslim community for the wrong that is done by a small gang, which had unfortunately been the perpetrators of the Easter Sunday attacks. But this agenda has been there for a long time, ever since the conclusion of the war. The conclusion of the war brought about a sense of triumphalism among the Sinhala majority, and the government of the time felt it necessary to create a narrative to make the Muslims the next enemy, so that they can keep the mobilization of the Sinhala majority in their favor. And this is nothing but an effort to try and demonize and stigmatize a hapless community, which is now getting marginalized day by day with all type of racist policy decisions. And this is one such other thing.
Shreen Abdul Saroor, part of the narrative here seems to come down to a stance on the part of the government, and they say, look, Muslim women never used to wear the burqa anyway, so what's the problem if we insist that it's to be banned?
To begin with, there is no clear-cut definition of what they are trying to ban, because some people are saying it's niqab, some people are saying it's burqa, so it's various forms of face covering, body covering. So the issue with the community here is that, in my estimate, 1% of the Muslim women still wear niqab. And after the Easter Sunday attack, lots of women on their own removed it, because then also under emergency regulation, they brought in not only face veil ban, there was a circular issued by public administration secretary to even remove the hijab. So our fear is what they are trying to ban at a time where everybody is wearing face mask and covering their face. If it is national security, it's for everybody to identify. I mean, there is no identification whatsoever right now. And what is it all about women's, Muslim women's attire being connected to extremism and them being demonized, as Honorable Rauff Hakeem said?
Jehan Perera from the National Peace Council, also in Colombo. Shreen Abdul Saroor raises a very valid point there, doesn't she? Because is the government, and it would be nice if somebody from the government was here, they are not, they've declined our invitation. Are they cynically going into a grey area? Because it seems to me that most people outside of the Muslim world, indeed most people perhaps even in the broader Muslim world, they don't know the difference between the hijab, the niqab and the burqa anyway.
Yes, we can say that the decision has still not been taken. I think that's the reason why the government representatives do not want to come, because what is there on the table now is a proposal signed by one minister, the Minister of National Security. And but it has not been yet accepted by the cabinet, and it also has to go before Parliament. I think the government is aware that this is a very controversial matter, and they have not come to a conclusion. And I hope that their decision is not to ban the burqa and also to close down 1,000 Muslim madrasas, Sunday schools, on the grounds that they are not regulated, they have not registered with the ministry. Of course, they can ask them to register and they can supervise them, but I don't think they should be closing them. But as Mr. Rauff Hakeem and Shreen said, there's the issue of nationalism here. This government is a government that was elected on the basis of majority nationalism, Sinhalese nationalism, as well as the desire to protect national security. And this government was elected in the aftermath of the Easter bombings, which were by Muslims. Though, as was pointed out by Mr. Hakeem, this group of Muslims who performed this action, many of them were very educated young people, educated abroad in foreign countries, and who had no real organic links with Sri Lanka. So you cannot blame the Muslim community for that. But that is what has happened. That is, in fact, and that's the injustice of what has happened, because traditionally, the Sri Lankan Muslims have been an extremely peaceful community. They were victims in the 30-year war between the Sri Lankan state and the Tamil rebels. And even prior to that, there is no real history of the Muslims being terrorists or being violent. And it has been the case even after that. Okay. After this Easter attack, there has been no incident of Muslim aggression. So it is really unfair that the government should be targeting the Muslims in this way.
Rauff, Hakeem, again, coming back to you as a former Minister of Justice, I guess if we could ask the government, and we're heading towards the 2-year anniversary of the Easter attacks, in the run-up to that time, which presumably there will be more tension almost palpably in the air as people remember what happened 2 years ago, I guess the government might admit we had to make the entire country feel safer. That was why we brought the ban in almost 2 years ago. But how does it make the country, even the majority Buddhist population, feel safer now if they introduce this ban going forward?
The government attempts to carry on continuous, relentless propaganda through their captive media organizations, both government media as well as private media, to create Islamophobic fear psychosis. This has been their main ploy throughout. And now with the Easter Sunday attacks Presidential Commission report out, we can see there is a clear overreach by the Commission also going into such controversial topics such as banning this, that or the other, in order to appease the majority sentiment that has been created by a very well-planned media strategy of the government. And this is what is very unfortunate. But they don't realize, as Jehan said, the so-called group of people who had committed this heinous crime appears to be a cult which has been the making of certain intelligence operation to demonize the Muslims. In fact, pit the Muslims against the Catholics. We had absolutely no enmity with any religious communities, so much so the Catholics themselves. Then these are the two communities which voted overwhelmingly against this regime in the regime change that took place 5 years ago. Okay. And that was perhaps the reason why such a plot was designed and executed.
Okay, I'd like to get into the political manoeuvrings surrounding this in a couple of minutes, if we may. Shreen Abdul Saroor, the Colombo Gazette today on its website is talking about this as being a racist agenda. However, if we look at around the world, France, Belgium, Austria and Italy, just 4 countries that have either enacted this kind of legislation, or I think the Italian government about 4 or 5 years ago had it drafted, didn't carry through on it. In Europe, it seems as if it's a much more nuanced debate that everyone gets a chance to engage with, and the governments of the day react accordingly. If that supposition on my part is right, what does it tell us about the Sri Lankan government that they are not prepared to do the same thing?
So, as I pointed out previously, also the Muslim community after Easter attack, we have been looking inward and we have been trying to look at what went wrong within the community. So Sri Lankan government should have had consultation with Muslim women, because oftentimes it's men who define our dress code. Even for women to wear hijab or abaya or niqab, we don't want our Muslim men to tell us what we should wear. We have to decide what we have to wear. It's about our dignity and our body and our dress code. So in that context, the Sri Lankan government should have had consultation with women, particularly burqa, niqab wearing women, and to have their consent, and also to tell them, because it's psychological feeling of all of a sudden removing something you have been wearing since your teenage age, for you to remove. It's like many women feel that they are naked. That's the concept that they have acknowledged as modesty and piety and all those things. So that conversation never happened. And also, like, Sri Lanka should not borrow bad examples from other countries. We are a pluralistic country. Our constitution talks about diversity, multi-community, and we have Article 10 talks about our religious freedom. Article 12 talks about equality before law. So with all those things, Sri Lankan government miserably failed consulting this community, and it's continuously targeting the Muslim community, because this is bartering the rights. Like, they gave us few weeks ago our burial rights, that very unfairly they took it away from us using COVID. And that day itself, the justice minister, who is also a Muslim, told niqab will be taken away. What is the government doing? I mean, by bartering rights in the country. And that also they have to take the Muslim women's right, because all those men who blow themselves up never wore any niqab or hijab or burqa or whatever. They are all men. So in that context, why are they penalizing the women? This is the question that we all have.
Jehan Perera from the National Peace Council. The Sri Lankan government is also reportedly closing down up to 1,000 Muslim schools. Presumably that decision-making process came after a period of scrutiny where government inspectors, education inspectors, were going into the schools and saying, no, you are in breach of national education policy. Do we know if similar Christian schools were subjected to not dissimilar scrutiny on the part of the authorities?
No, we have not heard that. And of course, the justification for that would be that the Christians are currently not a security threat, whereas the Muslims are a security threat because of what happened on Easter Sunday. But I think that that is not fair at all. They should come out and say what actually they are finding. If they are finding something that is being taught at the madrasas, they must come out and tell that. And also, most of the madrasas are also registered with the government. I think the ones that they are planning to close down are ones that have not yet registered. They should be asked to register.
Rauff, Hakeem, is Mr. Rajapaksa, to go back to the political dynamic that you were talking to us about a little earlier, is Mr. Rajapaksa here kind of riding a wave, if you will, of identifying a minority, implicitly pointing a finger of suspicion at that minority, even though that minority have done nothing wrong, and that's a journal of record, that's a matter of journalistic fact, that the Muslim minority have done nothing wrong in the country. Because the president 2 years ago talked about the burqa as being, quotes, the flag of fundamentalism. Didn't describe it as an item of clothing, talked about it in very loaded terminology.
Yes, indeed. This has been the narrative that they have created all throughout in order to mobilize the Sinhala majority in their favor. And, playing such cheap politics has been their brand. And that is quite apparent. But what we are concerned today is that when you talk about these madrasa schools, I mean, they are still to produce strong evidence to suggest. They are only talking about this Wahhabi ideology and then various other doctrines that are polluting the climate of coexistence in the country. They are yet to produce strong evidence from the curricula itself that are being taught in the madrasas. I very categorically deny there is no such devious and dangerous content in the curricula of these madrasas, except for teaching religious scriptures, because our madrasa system has been an age-old system that has been practiced over a period of time. But there is a disproportionate attention being paid to Muslim schools on the pretext of trying to be too intrusive to look at their curricula. But the community itself is quite capable of self-regulating our own religious instruction schools, which we have been doing. And we, after the Easter Sunday attacks, have taken upon ourselves the need to do a serious introspection within the community. And we are doing this. So that they must leave these matters for self-regulation by
Rauff,
the community.
I'm going to interrupt you there, but we are very quickly heading towards the end of the programme, and there are a final couple of points I want to get in. Jehan Perera, when it comes to the court of public opinion, how do your Buddhist friends, the 70, 80, 90% of the population across the country react to this? Because it feels as if we're talking about a government that wants to shunt a country towards being suspicious of the different, to be intimidated by a minority, instead of saying, look, we're basically a secular society and we can and we should all live in peace, particularly given what Shreen Abdul Saroor was telling us just 2 minutes ago about how people's minority rights are actually enshrined in the paperwork that constitutes Sri Lanka as a sovereign state.
Yeah, the Sri Lankan majority, the Sinhalese people, there is an insecurity in the Sinhalese coming from their history, ancient history of Tamil invasions 2,000 years ago, colonialism 500 years, and then what happened in more recent past, where India supported the Tamil militants against the Sri Lankan state, the internationalization of the conflict. So it is very easy to make the Sinhalese feel insecure. And the Easter attack really did that. It made them very insecure. And so up till recently, I think the Sinhalese would have been thinking that the Muslims are a real threat. But I have noticed that where this most recent, the burqa ban and the madrasa closure is concerned, what I'm seeing on social media is a different story. They are saying, what I'm reading is that people are saying, this is to divert attention from other problems, because the government is facing very serious problems, economic problems. We are close to defaulting. We are very desperately asking China for loans to tide over our foreign exchange crisis. There is the COVID is also pretty bad, like it is bad in the rest of the world. But the economy really bad. Then there's a huge corruption scam relating to sugar imports. I think, so people are saying this is to distract attention. And also elections are coming. There's going to be provincial elections in 3 or 4 months.
OK, last word. In the last minute of the programme, Jehan, I'm going to stop you there as well. Last 30 seconds of the programme to you, Shreen Abdul Saroor. If there is to be a push for a positive dialogue, a constructive dialogue, either surrounding this specific issue that we're talking about today, the burqa, because that seems to be symbolic for so many people, or just minority rights in the country, who's going to drive that? Where is that going to come from? Is there anyone in the political world of Sri Lanka who is prepared to send out a message of, look, we're all the same, let's just get on with each other?
We are in a very tough time. This particular regime has openly said, the head of the state himself has said it's a singular country, and he is a president for Buddhist, on an independent day. So he has clearly disowned the minorities in this country. Our future is with the international processes, because if you carefully look at it, Sri Lankan government even reacted to all our outcry inside going to Supreme Court, to various human rights mechanisms with regard to cremation. They only listen to international community. So international pressure is the only way forward. And Sri Lanka's resolution against Sri Lankan state is coming on Geneva Human Rights Council on 22nd. There are lots of Muslim countries as members, and then we look forward to that resolution to be passed, because that resolution in operational paragraph 7 and 8 talks about minority communities and their rights. Because if Sri Lanka really need reconciliation and peace, they wouldn't antagonize minorities like this. And with this particular government, I don't think there is a way forward with any form of dialogue.
Okay, Shreen, thank you so much. Thank you to our guests. As ever here on Inside Story, the clock has beaten us. Our guests were Rauff, Hakeem, Shreen Abdul Saroor and Jehan Perera. And just to reiterate what I said at the top of the show, we did ask somebody from the government to join us for this contentious debate out of Sri Lanka. Nobody was available to talk to Al Jazeera today. You can see this program again, of course, via the website, aljazeera.com. You can talk to us via Facebook, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or talk to us on Twitter, our handle @AJ Inside Story. From me, Peter Dobbie, and the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We will see you very soon. For the moment, bye-bye.